I thought owning a quiet little cabin in the woods would be my escape from chaos, but I was wrong. One afternoon, I pulled up the long gravel driveway and noticed something strange fluttering on my gate, a bright orange flyer with the words, "For sale," in bold black letters. My heart sank. I wasn't selling my property. I hadn't listed it. But somehow, someone had. That's when I noticed a sleek black SUV parked just beyond the trees, and a couple stepping out with clipboards, talking about closing costs and market value. My stomach dropped. What was going on here? I rushed out of my truck and approached the strangers, demanding to know what they were doing on my property. What they told me made my stomach twist. They were realtors, and according to them, this cabin was already listed for sale. The most shocking part? The listing information came directly from the HOA. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had never put my property on the market. I had never signed a single document. So why were there strangers casually walking around my land as if it belonged to them? The realtor, looking slightly embarrassed, explained that the HOA had given them pre-approval to show the cabin to potential buyers. That was the moment my shock turned into pure anger. I immediately called the HOA president, and when he finally picked up, his tone was cold, detached, like nothing unusual was happening. He said, "We're just getting a market valuation. It's nothing personal." Nothing personal. They had listed my property without permission, invited strangers onto my land, and acted like it was perfectly normal. When I demanded to know under what authority they had the right to do this, the president chuckled softly and said, "You'll understand soon enough." That sentence haunted me. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something bigger was happening, something I wasn't supposed to know about yet. My mind raced with questions. Was the HOA trying to force me to sell? Were they targeting my property specifically? Or was this part of some hidden plan involving the entire neighborhood? One thing became painfully clear: if I didn't act fast, I could lose my cabin without even knowing how it happened. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to wait around for the HOA's plan to unfold. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them I wasn't going to be an easy target. I drove straight to the hardware store, bought a heavy-duty lock, and secured my front gate. Then I made my own sign, bold, bright red letters, "Private property, not for sale." I nailed it right onto the wooden post where their flyer had been. Within hours, the phone calls started coming in. First, the realtor called, frustrated and confused. "Why did you cancel the showing?" she asked. Then came the HOA president, his voice icy this time. He said, "You can't just put up signs without our approval." That was the moment I realized they weren't just testing boundaries, they were trying to control me and my land. But the real shock came later that afternoon when I caught another car parked outside my property. Two men were standing near the gate, taking photos and writing something down on clipboards. When I confronted them, they said they were inspecting the cabin on behalf of the HOA. I asked them to leave immediately, and for the first time, I saw hesitation in their eyes. Something about my defiance was throwing off their plans, but I still didn't know why. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the trees outside and every crunch of gravel on the driveway made my heart race. I kept replaying the events of the past 2 days in my head, the fake listing, the unauthorized showings, and the strange men taking photos of my cabin. By sunrise, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just about a simple market valuation. The HOA was after something. And I was determined to find out what. I started digging through every HOA document I had, from meeting minutes to policy updates, and that's when I found something buried deep in the fine print. There was a clause, one I had never noticed before, that gave the HOA the power to force a sale if they could prove a property was neglected or underutilized. My blood ran cold. My cabin wasn't neglected, but it sat on several acres of pristine land, and I had only been using it seasonally. If they labeled it underutilized, they could legally sell it out from under me, without my consent. Suddenly, everything made sense: the fake listing, the photos, the inspections. They weren't just testing market value. They were building a case against me. I called the HOA president again, this time demanding answers. He didn't deny it. In fact, his words were chilling: "You've had that land sitting there for years. We have better plans for it, plans that benefit the community. You can either cooperate, or watch what happens next." My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. It was no longer just about my cabin. This was about control, about power. And I realized I was fighting more than just an overreaching HOA. I was fighting a system designed to push me out, to erase my rights on my own land. I stood at my window, looking out over the quiet forest, and I knew one thing: if I didn't stand my ground now, I'd lose everything I had worked for. And something told me, the real battle hadn't even begun yet. The following week felt like a chess match I hadn't agreed to play. Every move I made seemed to trigger another counter from the HOA. They sent more letters, more inspection notices, and even threatened fines if I didn't comply with their community improvement plan. But I wasn't giving in. I contacted a few neighbors, hoping someone else was experiencing the same harassment, and that's when the real story began to unravel. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. 2 other property owners had already been pressured into selling their land. At first, I thought maybe they just gave up, but when I spoke to them, they told me the HOA had buried them under fines, citations, and endless harassment until they had no choice but to walk away. Their land, like mine, had been listed for sale, and within weeks, it had been bought by a private development company working hand in hand with the HOA board. Suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't about community improvements. This was about money. My cabin sat on a prime piece of land right near the lake, and they wanted it for their development project. They were systematically forcing out longtime owners to make room for investors. I realized then that I had 2 choices: fight them, or lose everything. So I lawyered up, filed a cease and desist letter, and started documenting everything: every call, every visit, every notice taped to my gate. The more I dug, the more corruption I uncovered, and now, I wasn't just protecting my cabin. I was exposing the entire HOA. But here's the thing: my battle is far from over. Every day feels like another move in a high-stakes game where one wrong step could cost me my home. And if you think this is just one isolated HOA nightmare, think again. Stories like mine are happening everywhere, and most people don't even know their rights until it's too late. If you've ever faced an HOA nightmare, or you want to protect yourself from one, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking cases on HOA Case Files. Trust me, you won't believe what's coming next.